Darn. I got too greedy. It was that last 2 million that must have done it. Should have just let that one go. I knew there was something wrong with that account. Darn. Now they were getting close. It looked like they thought that I didn't know it yet, though. That would help. I still had time to get away and make sure that they couldn't track me down any further. Thankfully, I had a plan for this. So who am I, and who is trying to track me down? Who I am right now isn't important, as this identity is about to completely disappear. In 2 hours, I will be someone completely different. The trail that the hunters are following will dead end before they can get enough information to figure out who I am. What I am, or soon to be was, is a computer genius. I am very skilled with computers. I'm also very angry with a very select list of targets. I go after drug cartels. I go after their bank accounts, and anonymously, of course, supply incriminating evidence to the proper authorities. I am personally responsible for the convictions of 4 politicians, at least 50 police officers, a dozen soldiers in different countries, and so many small-time dealers that I can't even count. I've also drained well over $100 million from their funds. Of course, I take a portion of that, but about 80% ends up with different charities, most dealing with drug abuse and rehab programs. Why, you ask? Simple. My younger sister got involved with the wrong guy. I really didn't like him, but she didn't listen to me. I did what I could, but she made her choice. I had tried my best to take care of her after our parents died. I was always really good with computers, but the 2 dark years I spent in a depressed isolation after identifying what was left of her body turned me from really good to almost magical. Those 2 years were spent alone in the basement of my parents' old house learning the dark secrets and how to manipulate them. I learned code. I discovered how to navigate the deep web. I discovered back doors into most security software. Sometime in that 2 years, some very damaging information on the drug gang that tortured and murdered my sister ended up in the hands of the DEA. Unfortunately, rival gangs somehow got the information that the gang in question was turning state's evidence on others to try and make a deal. Gangs move faster than cops, so the state saved a bunch of money on trials. Now, as for who I am running from, my best guess right now is either Russian or North Korean hackers. Even though I'm not sure which it is, I am sure that they were hired by the cartel that I had just relieved of about $30 million. I really should have stopped at $28 million, but then I discovered that other small account. I knew there was something wrong with it, but I was young, naive, and still angry. As soon as that money was on its way through 40 different accounts in 6 countries, my counter-hacking program started alarming. Someone had put a backtracking program in the account. They were looking for where the attack was initiated. That was going to take a while. I was using a botnet attack. They were going to have to cycle through about 100 IP addresses before they could even start the roundabout server chain track. I put in a flash drive and gave a few keystrokes and mouse clicks. 4 servers in Europe crashed. 2 servers in China reformatted themselves 6 times. 1 server in Iran and another in America rewrote their entire memory with a random series of 1s and 0s. The trail back to me was effectively severed with no way to retrieve the data. 3 more mouse clicks, and my carefully crafted machines were reduced to useless scraps of wires, plastic, and fried silicon. The abandoned building I was using burned down from a homeless campfire that got out of control. Most of my wrecked computer system had been divided up and thrown in random dumpsters around the city. The hard drives and memory sticks were burned in a bonfire out in the desert, along with all my personal identification. After making sure that there would be no way to get any information from the burning pile of rubble, I got in the van and started driving west. I arrived in Las Vegas 4 days later. 5 years later, honey, can you give me a hand here? The computer is acting up again. I called out to my dear wife, Linda. Seriously, Mark, how is it possible that a 25-year-old man is so clueless about computers? What would you do without me? She said as she gave me a quick hug. And I was back to checking my email. Dinner will be ready in about half an hour. Thanks, honey. I replied as I watched her walk back into the kitchen. It had been 2 years since Linda and I had gotten married. I still couldn't believe how lucky I was. After leaving my previous life, I had recreated myself. I was working as a truck driver for a local lumber yard. We were a union yard, so the pay was decent. I had very carefully retrieved a couple $100,000 from one of my offshore accounts and bought a nice, modest 3-bedroom house on about an acre of property. I put up a steel building next to the house to use as a shop and storage. I also added a hidden room to rebuild and upgrade my computer system. It was a small walk-in storage room, but it had a false floor that would raise up to access a set of stairs leading underground if you didn't know how to open it up. It looked just like a regular concrete floor. I had decided that I would back off from going after dealers and cartels for a while. I had enough money tucked away if I needed it, and it was wise to disappear and let things cool off. Still, I didn't want to lose my skills, and I needed to keep up on the newer technology. The shop was for my hobby of restoring older muscle cars. The wife was completely not interested in that, so she never came into my shop. This also gave me the time and privacy to get online and play a bit without her suspecting anything. You may be wondering why I am hiding that from her. The truth is that she knows me as a simple truck driver and hobbyist mechanic that is almost clueless about computers. Obviously, when I met her and we began dating, I couldn't just come out and introduce myself as a computer genius called Ghost in the virtual world. First off, the authorities were looking for me. I had committed a few cybercrimes, and they also wanted to lock me in a room and use my skills for their own purposes. Second, there were several very dangerous criminal organizations that had me on their target list. If they caught me, my end would be very unpleasant and extremely painful. How long would our relationship have lasted after that? Do you even need to ask? There were a couple more reasons after we were married. First, it was for her own protection. If she didn't know, they couldn't use her for any information. Second, this ensured that she didn't accidentally let any information slip on accident. Nope. Better that she only knows the man she married. Okay, a bit about my wife. First, she is the most beautiful woman on the planet to me. I always read in these stories how every woman is always the most beautiful woman on the planet, and I wonder how there can be more than one of them. She is 5 feet, 6 inches tall, wavy copper bronze hair to the middle of her back, emerald green eyes, slim waist with a flat tummy. Her legs are long, lean, toned, and tan. Her face has a slim nose, high cheekbones, dimples when she smiles, full body lips, and a proud chin that isn't too prominent. So how did we meet? I was working at the lumber yard one afternoon when she came in. She needed a couple of boards to put up some shelving in her new apartment. I just happened to be lucky enough to be near the salesman when he rang up her order and volunteered to get the boards. While we were picking out her order, she mentioned that she really wasn't very handy with tools. Obviously, I offered to come over after work and install the shelves for her. My price was that she buys the beer and allow me to buy dinner the next evening. Dinner turned into dancing afterwards. Sorry, guys and gals. The date ended with just a friendly hug. The truth of the matter was that I was actually terrified of dating. Perhaps a bit of explanation is due here. When I stole all that money from the cartel, I was a thin 19-year-old, 6 foot 1 inch tall, 110-pound computer enthusiast. My love life to that point was non-existent. Another thing I should probably mention, I really had no clue about my physique. I just assumed that I looked like everyone else. Sure, people would compliment my appearance, but they were supposed to, right? Of course, I didn't really believe them when they complimented me. Linda and I dated for about 6 months before I proposed. 6 months later, we got married. We were happy together. She was an accountant for a large national company with an office in Las Vegas. She made pretty good money there, and we combined our incomes to live a pretty nice life. I never needed to dip into my secret accounts. We went out to nice restaurants, enjoyed entertainment shows, had a nice pontoon boat at the lake, and both drove nice cars. Typically, after I got home from work, I would go into my workshop and tinker around for a couple of hours before dinner. About half the time, I would be working on one of my cars, and the other half I would be in the room playing around on the computer. I wasn't up to anything malicious, just trying to learn new things and improve my skills. I never actually took anything or manipulated any systems. I was just getting in and exploring without anyone knowing that I was there. After dinner, we would cozy up on the couch and watch a movie before going to bed. Sometimes we would just cuddle as we drifted off to sleep. I kept up my public image of being technologically challenged. After all, who would suspect someone who could barely check their email of having exceptional computer skills? All the while, I was exploring different systems and networks. I also updated my network of personal computers. I was cautious about hiding my location by using servers in different countries. Sometimes I would work from multiple servers simultaneously. About 6 months ago, I noticed that Linda was becoming more stressed. It didn't seem like a big deal at first. She was working longer hours and would often come home exhausted. Most of the time, she would go straight to the shower, eat dinner, and then go to bed. Occasionally, she would call me from her office on a Friday and let me know that she was going to hang out with her colleagues for a few drinks after work. She had done this enough times before that I wasn't worried. After about 6 months of this, I asked her how much longer this would continue. I thought that by now they should have resolved the project one way or another. Linda assured me that it would likely be only another week or two, and then things would settle down again. I thought she deserved some pampering after working so hard, so I surprised her with a full-day pampering package for that Saturday. She was thrilled when I gave it to her on Wednesday evening. She thanked me with a kind gesture, then we shared a special moment. Finally, Saturday arrived, and she left for her day at the spa at 9 a.m. With a quick goodbye, she was out the door. She wouldn't be back until around 4 in the afternoon. I grabbed my coffee and headed out to the workshop to finish assembling an engine. About an hour later, I took a break and went into my computer room. Up until now, I had purposely avoided accessing Linda's company's systems. It was a personal rule of mine to not mess with the company I worked for, and I extended that rule to the company she worked for. However, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to have a quick look at the big project she was working on, and maybe I could explore their networks afterwards. Their security measures were weak. I gained access within a couple of minutes. First stop, Linda's computer. Since she was involved in the project, I figured I could find some clues there. Oddly enough, I found nothing that indicated any significant new clients. I ran a few keyword searches related to potential new accounts, but nothing came up. I decided to delve deeper into her folders. That's when I stumbled upon a locked folder labeled Photos for James. What was this? Why did Linda have a folder with photos for that guy? Yes, I knew who James was. I had met him a few times at corporate events that I attended with Linda. I didn't particularly like him. Though Linda considered herself skilled with computers, she was no match for me. I quickly unlocked the folder and browsed through its contents. To say that I was shocked would be an understatement. I sat there numbly, my heart sinking. About 15 minutes later, according to the computer's clock, I snapped out of my shock and started thinking about how to confront her once she got home. Divorcing her was an inevitable choice. I still had several hours before her return, so I continued my investigation. I suspected that all of this started around 6 months ago when her behavior changed. I accessed her email account and made an even more disturbing discovery. Several email exchanges hinted that this affair had been going on much longer than I thought. It seemed they had been involved romantically even before she met me. If that were true, why did she even start a relationship with me? What was really going on? I found another email where there was mention of accounting discrepancies with some important clients and with their own company. There was also something about an offshore account. I switched to James' computer. I found more photos of Linda. Some were taken in a motel room, while others were in a bedroom that didn't belong to either of them. James was more knowledgeable about computers, but still no match for me. I needed more time with this, so I ended up copying their computers and files from the company network onto a drive on my server. Out of curiosity, I checked the personnel folder on the server. I paused for a moment when I saw a folder with my name. I made a copy of that one as well. Before leaving the network, I installed spyware on both their computers and the server. This would discreetly forward their activities to my computer system. Needless to say, any work on my cars was put on hold for a while. Sunday arrived and I was back in my workshop. Linda was still asleep when I woke up, so I took the chance to access her phone and install spyware on it. Text messages would be discreetly copied to my computer system, and her phone calls would be monitored and recorded on a separate hard drive. I would also be able to track her online activities. Linda left at around 10 in the morning. She said that she was going to meet one of her friends for some shopping. She had her Friend Finder app turned off on her phone, and I didn't really want to accidentally notice that it had been turned on, so I instead hacked into her car's internal GPS to track her. Surprisingly, she actually did go to the mall. When I was sure that she wouldn't be returning soon, I went back into the house and grabbed her laptop. First thing was to copy everything on her laptop onto another hard drive. Next, I loaded up a keylogger program and set up the camera for remote access. I didn't think that I had a whole lot of time before I had to get her laptop back where she left it, but I figured I could take a quick look at her browser history. That's when I found a second email address. I also noticed that she had several visits to a bank in the Cayman Islands. I would need to look at that later. I wiped a bit of grease and oil on my arms and face to make it look like I was actually working on a car when I heard Linda arrive back home. Shower, dinner, movie, then bed. For the next week, I kept up appearances of being the clueless, doting husband that I pretended to be. Every evening, I went out to the shop pretending to be working on one of my cars for a couple of hours. I dutifully smeared grease on myself before coming back to the house. In fact, I was going over the mountains of information that I was collecting. It was Tuesday evening that I read a text exchange between Linda and James that caught my attention. James had cautioned her about erasing the history on my laptop after using it. Why would she be using my laptop? Hers was working fine. Of course, I had set my laptop up to connect to my servers as soon as I bought it, but never really thought about spying on myself. A dozen keystrokes and mouse clicks later, that was resolved. The next evening, while I was sorting through the day's updates from their work computers, another stream of data started to come through. I quickly saw that it was from my personal laptop. Minimizing everything else, I started to look at the new stream coming over. It looked like money transfers were happening. I turned on my laptop's camera and pulled the feed to another screen. There was Linda working on my computer. She was wearing a Bluetooth in her ear as well. The mic was picking up her voice as she talked. I used a third screen to stream a live feed from her phone call. I watched and listened to Linda following the instructions from James as she transferred about $50,000 from a dummy account in their company over to a bank in the Cayman Islands. And they were using my computer to do it. She finished soon after, deleted the history for that day, and logged off. What the heck was going on here? I really hadn't had time to look at my personnel file from their HR folder yet, as it didn't seem to be as important as other things. That changed right then. It seemed that I had been set up as a computer security consultant. I really did respect the detail that they used in creating my fake credentials. James had apparently hired me, since he was head of their IT department. I also found several payments for my services all going to the Cayman Island account, of course. Let's review. I had unknowingly been hired as a computer security consultant. Linda and James were using my computer and IP address to transfer large sums of money from a fake account at their firm to an offshore bank. Furthermore, Linda and James had been having an affair since before I met Linda. I was beginning to understand that I was being set up for something. Time to switch gears. Now that I had figured out what was going on, I needed to see how bad it was and figure out what to do about it. It was bad. Checking the Cayman Islands account, I saw I had almost $10 million in it. Checking the transfers, I saw that they had been doing this since about 6 months after Linda and I got married. They also weren't being very subtle about trying to hide what computer was being used to steal the money either. Worse, a deeper dig into the personnel file in my name showed a few red flags. Yep, when the evidence hit the fan, I was the one in the target zone. Now, what was I going to do about it? Surprisingly, it really wasn't that difficult to act normally around the bitch. I just let my instincts take charge whenever she was around. She wanted to harm me? I would gladly retaliate, as I said about really ruining them both. What can I say? She's attractive. Yes, I took every opportunity to humiliate her. The next Saturday, I went through her emails during the time we met. That's when I found out that they picked me for a scapegoat from day one. Yes, she thought that I was good-looking, and that being with me wouldn't exactly be a problem, but she was a bit concerned with my apparent lack of computer skills. James thought that it would be an advantage. The less I knew about operating computers, the less likely I would be to discover their plan. Little did they know. Now I needed a plan for my payback. I began setting everything up. First off, a couple of new bank accounts were set up. Next, I activated my army of computers that I created. Most of the computers would be distractions, but I had one small group that could be traced, although it would be difficult. Only a really skilled hacker would be able to find the source. I didn't want it to be too easy. Of course, I wiped the personnel folder with my name on it from Linda's company servers. I also broke in and shifted all the file transfers that were done on my laptop to show a different IP address. To prevent that from happening again, I set off a malicious virus on my laptop, then disconnected it from my secret servers. Later that evening, when I went to check my email, I discovered that a virus had attacked my laptop from a spam email that I opened and pretty much destroyed it. I didn't mention the look of concern on Linda's face when she saw what happened. The next morning, I saw a text exchange between Linda and James. Apparently, they were almost at the end of the scam. They just wanted 2 more transfers to make it an even $10 million before revealing the trap. The plan was to suddenly discover the theft. Of course, since Linda would be the one to actually discover it, she would be in charge of the investigation. James, being the IT manager, would be running the cyber part of the investigation. Unsurprisingly, everything would lead straight back to me. Linda would, of course, have me served with divorce papers while I sat in jail, then eventually marry James after about a year. Both would claim complete shock that I would ever do something like that. Of course, there would be some doubt about Linda's possible involvement, but she would point to her investigation and discovery, as well as her belief that I must have been hiding my knowledge of computers from her. Also, it must be obvious that she was a victim, since I specifically targeted her and used her to gain access to the company's computer systems. They both laughed at the thought of me trying to answer questions about where the money went when I had no idea what the police were talking about. Linda also said she would get me a new laptop, and that they could make the last transfers within the next 3 weeks. Now I knew what my deadline was. Monday, I went in and told my boss that I needed the week off for some personal stuff. I had plenty of vacation time, and he was a pretty cool guy, so it wasn't a problem. I did some online research to find the toughest, most aggressive shark for a divorce lawyer in the city, and made an appointment for the next day. They thought that they had 3 weeks, but they would be lucky to last 2 weeks. Returning home, I fired up my computer system and went to work. I logged onto James's home computer. For an IT guy, you would think that he would have enough sense to shut it down and power it off when he wasn't using it. Nope, all he did was turn off the monitor. I was running his computer through a server in Belarus. Not that it really mattered, because that link would be erased anyway. His computer would be the end of the trail for anyone following it. The cartel that I had targeted 5 years ago had at least learned something about security. They had changed their accounts and passwords, but still used the same banks. Improved passwords? They only work when you don't store them on your personal computers that are vulnerable to phishing software embedded in email links for items that any multimillionaire would want. This was just the preliminary work. I would wait until I was finished with Linda before going after James. James wasn't going to survive this, and I still needed to use him for Linda's downfall. I was still monitoring Linda's GPS on her car, so I was able to leave and go to a park for about an hour before returning home. She didn't need to know that I took the week off. Actually, she probably did need to know, but I wasn't going to give her that piece of information to try and save herself. As usual, I went out to my shop to work on my car. She did leave to run to Walmart and get me a new laptop. While she was gone, I did some preliminary work on setting her up. It was important for her to be at home when her computer was used. If she could show that she wasn't home, she could have a defense for the crime. Couldn't let that happen. She texted me when she got home to let me know that she got me a new laptop and told me it would take her about an hour to set it up for me. I thanked her and went to work. First off, eliminate all connections with James. I didn't have any desire to physically harm her, but James was probably going to be caught and exposed, while Linda was just going to go to prison for the next couple of decades. Who knows? Perhaps she will find companionship there. Doesn't the saying go, making new friends in unexpected places? I used a separate server to link into Linda's laptop. No roundabout path here. Just a straight connection to her work computer, then the company servers. $20 million was moved from the company to 4 different accounts in her name. Next, travel plans were made. A one-way ticket for her was purchased for Thursday morning to the Cayman Islands. Before leaving her computer, I deleted James from her contacts, erased all her emails with him, and removed all her history from the account that they were originally using. Next, I removed all the spyware that I had installed. This was a risk, but I didn't figure that she would have enough time to do anything too bad. Lastly, I severed the link and erased the data that I had with her laptop. With all that done, I remotely shut down the wireless router to the house. I had a separate and much better one in the shop. Of course, she didn't know that. A message popped up from the spyware that I had put on her phone. Apparently, she had finished setting up my laptop for me when the internet went out. She was just about to use my computer for another transfer when the connection was lost. I laughed. While they were discussing the problem, I moved all the money that they already stole into the new accounts I had created in Linda's name. Once that account was empty, I closed it. The last thing I did was to erase the spyware on Linda's phone. I didn't know who would be looking at it later and didn't want anyone to find out that she was being monitored. I then shut everything down and went inside for dinner. Tomorrow would be an interesting day, to say the least. Linda was a bit agitated, to say the least, when I came into the house. She told me that my new computer was set up and ready, but that the internet was down. I wouldn't be able to log on and check my email until it was fixed. She had no clue how minor of a problem that was for me. She was preoccupied throughout the entire movie that night. I watched out of the corner of my eye as she played on her phone. I could almost feel her frustration growing. When asked if there was a problem, she just passed it off as a client issue at work. I suspected that she had been trying to access the account and failing. She was also texting with someone. I smiled as I went to bed. The next morning, I was up and out of the house before Linda left for work. I basically just messed around until my appointment with the lawyer. I did wonder how Linda's day was going for her. I would be finding out in a couple of hours, though. I was finally led into my lawyer's office. You know those TV shows where a confident lawyer wearing a professional outfit walks into the courtroom and impresses everyone? That was my lawyer. 5 feet 6 inches tall, beautiful face, curves that would make a race car lose control, legs for miles, and a charming personality. 2 minutes into the meeting, and I could tell that she would be a force to be reckoned with in the courtroom. You could almost hear music playing in the room. Verifying that everything was confidential, I explained that my wife had been cheating on me throughout our relationship. I further explained to her about the embezzlement and setup. She asked how I found out about all this, and I gave her a partial answer. I didn't exactly lie, but I didn't tell her the whole truth either. Okay, I stretched the truth a bit. I told her that I used my wife's laptop because mine was not working right. That's when I saw a folder with a bunch of inappropriate pictures, then found her emails to her lover. The emails documented her betrayal and their embezzlement. I just wanted to get out of the marriage before everything got worse. She agreed to take the case and begin preparing the legal documents. She said that she could probably have her served by the end of the week. I told her to hold on to it for a while. I suddenly had a better idea for it and didn't want to expose too much too soon. We wrapped up the meeting, and I went home, turned on my computer, restarted the house Wi-Fi, and got to work. I had left the monitoring software on at Linda's work. Apparently there was trouble brewing. An emergency meeting was held first thing in the morning. A large amount of money had been discovered missing, and an investigation was launched. By this time, I had managed to unlock James's phone. James was tracking the theft and discovered that it led straight back to Linda. He also found that their account had been emptied and transferred into new accounts with the money from last night. Accusations were flying, and no explanations could be found. Suddenly, Linda received an email saying that she was being called to a meeting with the CEO, CFO, and head of security. This should be interesting. The sound of several vehicles pulling into my driveway interrupted my fun. I shut down, went into the main shop area, and secured the hidden door. No need for anyone to take an interest in that room. Yes, I did get a little dirty to make it look like I was working on my car. Walking out of the shop, I saw several police vehicles, as well as a few large Chevy Suburbans. The police were in their normal uniforms, but the people getting out of the large SUVs wore windbreakers with FBI written on the back. I wonder what this could possibly be about. I barely glanced at the warrants and let them into the house. Of course, I offered all assistance since I had nothing to hide. I showed them around. Yes, that would be my wife's computer. That one is mine, but it hasn't really been used since we only got it yesterday and the Wi-Fi was down last night. Of course, take anything you think you need. No, I have absolutely no idea what is going on. Sorry, I'm not very good with computers. Just ask my wife and all our friends. I lost track of what was happening to Linda as I was taken to the police station and interviewed thoroughly for a few hours. My story held up through it all. After all, I was just a truck driver with barely any knowledge of computers. No, I had no idea what my wife was doing at work. She was an accountant working with several clients, but I didn't know who those clients were. What do you mean about a one-way ticket out of the country? Just her? No, I have no idea why she would be taking a flight somewhere without me. It soon became obvious to them that I knew nothing about what was going on. They had thoroughly searched my shop but did not find my computer room. Eventually, they let me go back home. Linda had been arrested while I was being questioned. Poor James was forced to give the evidence against her, as well as seeing all the money located so it could be returned. He must have really felt betrayed when he found that she had taken away his access to it, transferred it into her own accounts, then booked a single one-way trip out of the country, leaving him with nothing. Thankfully, I had anticipated that I would be interrogated. I was her husband, after all. It would only make sense to assume that I might be working with her on it. Of course, I was her one phone call. Being the supportive husband, I called and got her a lawyer. Yes, I did my research on all the criminal lawyers in the city. Obviously, I needed to find the best lawyers so I wouldn't accidentally mess up and hire one of them for her. No, I purposely hired one of the ones that were just below average. I wouldn't get the worst one. because that could open an appeal for having a poor defense in court. I wanted her convicted and serving her entire sentence. The really cool thing about this being a federal case was that federal prisons do not have parole or time off for good behavior. If you get sentenced to 20 years in federal court, you spend the entire 20 years in a federal prison to the day. I attended her bail hearing and used the house as collateral to bail her out. Since she was a flight risk, she had to wear an ankle monitor. As much as I resented her, I was still able to pretend to be the loving husband to everyone. Thankfully, she was too upset and shocked at her situation to want anything more than emotional support. Her cell phone had been taken away as evidence, so I went and got her a new one. Yes, I took it into my shop and added my spyware to it before giving it to her. Strangely, James had blocked her number after her first text to him. He had replied that he could have no contact with her, since he was going to be called as a witness against her. She actually thought that she would win because she hadn't done everything the evidence showed. True, she was guilty of embezzling part of the money that was in that account, just not all the money, or using that particular account, or using her own computer, or buying the plane ticket, or cutting her partner out. Of course, the money was recovered and returned easily. The trial was interesting from my perspective. It was very intriguing watching as James testified about the computer records against her. I could see his internal struggle at having to testify against his lover, yet thinking that she had betrayed him and was planning on running away and leaving him behind. All Linda could see, though, was that her partner was betraying her and sending her to prison. I was filled with excitement throughout the 3 days of his testimony. She did her best on the witness stand testifying on her own behalf. Unfortunately for her, the evidence was too strong against her, and she really couldn't come up with a believable explanation for it. She will be spending the next 20 years in a federal penitentiary. As the trial was coming to an end, it was time to take care of James. I had a really cunning plan for him, one he would not survive. Unfortunately, he would never know why it happened to him, or that it was me. I couldn't risk that. This would be interesting. I had my lawyer modify the divorce documents to consider Linda's conviction and that she would be in prison for the next 2 decades. She was served a couple of days later. I set up a couple of new accounts in Geneva, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands with links back to James. Using some advanced technology, I left a few subtle footprints, all leading back to James's IP address. Ghost was back after 5 years. Sure enough, the hacker chats picked up on it. Now for the tricky part. I had to leave a trail, but it couldn't be obvious. I needed to make it challenging enough for them to believe that it was a skilled hacker and believe that it actually was me, but still let them think that I made a minor mistake that they could follow. I had to route through 10 servers in 6 different countries. Eventually, I activated the bot army and launched my attack on the first bank. Eventually, I gained access, found the 2 accounts I was looking for, and transferred the funds to James's new accounts. Once I finished, I ended the attack on the bank, removed any traces of my connection to James's computer, and started monitoring the darknet for a reaction. I wasn't expecting anything yet, but it's always better to be thorough. The next morning, I launched another attack on a different bank. 4 more accounts were emptied. There was now $20 million in the account that I had set up for James. People were starting to search for me. They wouldn't find me, of course, but they would eventually find Ghost. Some of the dark web hacker forums were getting active. There was a group from North Korea that seemed to be on the trail. It looked like the same group that was after me 5 years ago. It was time to wrap this up. I went back to the banks. Sure enough, the 3rd one I checked had the account I was after. I bypassed using James's computer and transferred the $20 million to another account in Switzerland that I had created. Then, I erased all evidence of the transfer. I wasn't concerned about the cartel retrieving the money. I reconnected to James's computer and launched another attack on the bank that had a hidden tracker in one of the accounts. This time, it was only $2 million. The money itself wasn't important, only the tracker attached to it. I had escaped last time because I knew about the thefts and could see the tracker working. If I had been unaware of the money transfers or the specific accounts, I would have been caught. I wonder how James will try to explain all of this to them. I wish I could witness their confusion as they ask him where the money went when he has no idea. It was time to sever my connections to his computer and erase all traces of my actions. A week later, I finished clearing out my computer room and converted it into a storage area. I was finalizing the paperwork for a property I purchased in Montana through a Subchapter S corporation that kept my identity hidden when a news story came on about a missing person. James hadn't shown up for work in days, and nobody knew his whereabouts. His abandoned car was discovered in a mall parking lot, but he was nowhere to be found. I wondered where he could be. Oh well. I needed to get back to packing. James knew. Damn it, I screamed as they used the cattle prod. I swear, I don't know what you are talking about. Nonsense, Mr. Ghost. You made a mistake this time. The tracking software that the hackers we hired led us directly to your computer. We found all the evidence on your computer. We recovered the funds from your last hack, but we want to know where the other funds, as well as the money from 5 years ago, are located. If you tell us, we'll kill you quickly. Keep lying and things will get worse. But I genuinely don't know. God damn it. They had taken me by surprise just as I was about to enter my car at the mall. I felt the sting of a needle in my neck and then darkness. Several hours later, I woke up on a private jet, tightly restrained to my seat. That's when the questioning began. I had no clue what they were talking about. They kept referring to me as Ghost. They asked about money they claimed I stole. There was money from a few days ago, and more from 5 years ago. They didn't believe me when I denied any involvement. I felt my world shatter when they showed me the supposed evidence on my personal computer. I realized that I couldn't provide them with any answers. Now, I was hanging in a secret bunker located deep in the Colombian jungle. I'd been here for 3 days already. On the first day, they beat me when I couldn't give them what they wanted. On the second day, they whipped me. I really wished I could give them the answers. I really didn't want to know what would happen tomorrow, or the day after that. Mark moving day. James had been absent for a little over a month. They discovered his tortured body yesterday on a roadside in Colombia. Mark would cease to exist by the end of the day. I would assume my new identity after one final stop. I had already shipped all my belongings to a storage facility in Denver, paid for anonymously through a wire transfer. I planned to collect them in a truck I paid for in cash. Linda was brought in and handcuffed to the table across from me. She didn't look well. She wore an orange jumpsuit and appeared disheveled. No makeup, and her hair was a mess. It seemed like she hadn't adapted to prison life. "So how are you holding up?" I asked. "Please, Mark, you have to help me." "I didn't do what they're saying," she pleaded. "Linda," I sighed. "There's nothing I can do for you. Besides, we're getting a divorce. Please, Mark, I didn't do it, and I don't want a divorce. Just sign the papers, Linda. It's over." "Please, Mark, just talk to James. See if he can help me. He used to be our friend. Please, just ask him." She begged. "Haven't you heard about James?" I inquired. "No, I kept expecting him to visit, but he never showed up." "Well, he won't be visiting anymore. He was killed in Colombia." Her face paled in shock. "Apparently, the authorities believe he stole a significant amount of money from a drug cartel." "No, he couldn't have," she protested. "He probably didn't, but that's what they think. Now, Linda, you really need to sign the divorce papers and move on, but you're leaving me with nothing," she exclaimed. "Exactly. You don't need anything, and even if you did, what would you do with it? You'll be in prison for the next 20 years. I explained. "Please, Mark, you have to help me. I can't stay here. I need to get out of here. Please." It was time. "Let me tell you a story, Linda. Maybe it will help you. About 5 years ago, there was an incredibly skilled hacker known as Ghost. He got that nickname because he was a master at covering his tracks. He was like a ghost in the computer systems. So, Ghost decided to target some drug cartels. It was a personal mission. He managed to steal over $30 million from one of them before the cartel hired other hackers to hunt him down. Of course, Ghost detected the trackers and vanished before they could catch him. Ghost disappeared and created a new life. He stopped all computer activities and pretended to be illiterate with technology. Even his wife had no idea who he truly was. Yes, he fell in love and got married. He loved his wife wholeheartedly. After being married for 3 years, he accidentally discovered that his wife didn't love him in return. He found out she had been cheating on him throughout their entire relationship with her real boyfriend. As if that wasn't enough, he learned that she only married him so she and her boyfriend could frame him for their embezzlement scheme. Her eyes widened, and her complexion turned completely pale as I revealed her plan back to her. Now, to continue, since Ghost took care of his wife, it was time to go after her lover. You see, that cartel was still searching for Ghost. So why not exact revenge and make the cartel believe they had finally captured their target? 2 birds, 1 stone. Ghost infiltrated the boyfriend's computer and stole even more money from the cartel. Unfortunately, Ghost made a minor mistake this time. He didn't entirely erase the trail leading back to the boyfriend's computer, allowing the cartel to track the hack to him. Fortunately, Ghost managed to erase any trace back to himself, making the boyfriend the apparent end of the trail. The authorities believe the boyfriend was tortured for over a month before he died. Sadly for him, he didn't possess the information the cartel wanted. None of this is true or believable, let alone provable, but I thought a fictional story might help you cope. Honestly, I do think you didn't do exactly what the evidence suggests, but it doesn't make you innocent. I walked away as they dragged her off, her screams filling the room. I got into the cheap disposable car and drove to the mall. After parking, I left Mark behind and walked through to the other side, where my real car awaited me. With my new identity, I drove away.